Good morning, America. Today is April 28th, and we are reporting live from New York City.
We have special guests who are kind enough to come in and answer a few questions for us.
Our first guest is Isaac Newton.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, so let's get started. Can you describe your 3 laws of motion you have discovered and proved to be right?
My first law is that an object in motion tends to stay in motion and an object at rest tends to stay at rest. The second law I used a mathematic formula to prove. It is force equals mass times acceleration. And the third law is every action there is an equal and opposite reaction.
Wow, that is so awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk with us.
Thank you for having me. It was a great time.
Our next visitor is Martin Luther.
Nice to have you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So let's go ahead and get started. How is your justification by faith doctrine important to history?
Well, it helped split up the Catholic Church, and I was able to put people on pretty much the same level.
Oh wow, that made some pretty big changes in society. I have another question for you, Mr. Luther.
Okay.
What complaints did you have about the Catholic Church?
Well, I had many complaints about the Catholic Church, including the sale of indulgences, the Pope, and also the biblical side of the Church's thoughts. Jesus can only forgive sins, not the Pope or indulgences. Going back to the Catholic Church, I think the Bible is the only thing to reach happiness.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Luther. It was great having you.
Thank you for having me.
Next up is Johannes Kepler.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Alright, so we're going to start off asking, how did you become interested in astronomy and science?
I became interested in astronomy and science when I was very young because it helped me escape from my home when my parents were fighting. Looking at the stars just relaxed me and made me feel like I was in a different world.
One last question for you, sir. When you wrote your book, Astronomia Nova, you were the first to suggest that the sun rotates about its axis. Can you explain?
Yes, I was the first to suggest it, and Galileo backed me up when he studied sunspots. If you use a telescope to try to project images of the sun on a piece of white paper, over a couple days the spots looked like they moved along the paper.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. Now, can we have all of the 3 previous guests out here?
We have some questions to get all of your opinions on. First, how does increased learning result in challenges to religious institutions?
Increased learning results in challenges to religious institutions because people know more facts, and sometimes religious institutions teach different things, which causes them to get stuck when people want to leave the church for other ideas.
Churches will have people like me arguing against their ideas, which is the reason for the 95 theses I had stated. These things cause people to revolt and have different disagreements.
I totally agree that disagreements cause revolts and challenges.
Second, how is intellectual development a catalyst for change?
Well, there are many ideas and thoughts that are created, and people will begin to question things like I questioned the Catholic Church. It changed the church because it collapsed and people started to take my thoughts and work against the church.
People understand new ideas and want to create more new ideas themselves.
Intellectual development encourages people to start thinking for themselves, and they start to ask questions to gain even more knowledge.
Third, what factors result in the demand for freedom?
People want freedom because they aren't able to think to their potential.
I agree. The things that result in the demand for freedom are the things that restrict freedom. When people aren't able to think to their potential, they demand freedom so that they can think on their own.
I completely agree with Isaac because people need to have a full ability to do things, and that requires a freedom of speech and thought.
Fourth, why do new forms of government develop?
There are new ideas throughout the earth that create new governments. When people start to ask questions and gain knowledge about previously unexplored topics, the government might adapt to that way of thinking.
I think that governments develop to fulfill people's political view. Governments control citizens, and that could cause an overthrow and creation of new ones.
My thought is that there is always something to be improved, and people create new governments to get those improvements.
And last but not least, how can revolutions impact global affairs?
Revolutions impact global affairs by spreading ideas and thoughts around the world through people. Revolutions get around pretty quickly. Different people may have different perspectives on things than their government does, which leads them to start questioning.
I agree that there is a spark for people to start asking questions, and it spreads around the globe.
I couldn't have said it better.
Thank you all for your time. It was great to have you all here, and I hope to see you all go down in history one day because of the great contributions you have made in mathematics and science. Now we will have 3 more guests join us. First off, everyone please welcome Mr. Galileo. Nice to see you.
Thank you for coming.
We will start off by rumors I have heard that what you saw through the telescope was so disturbing that the officials of the church refused to even look through the telescope.
Yes, they thought that the devil was capable of making anything appear in the telescope, so it was best not to look through it. They were superstitious.
What made you stand up for the Copernican theory?
Even though I was accused of heresy, I supported the Copernican theory using my telescope in mathematics.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And we now welcome John Locke.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for coming, John.
Thank you for having me.
So, do you mind explaining the life, liberty, and property principle?
Well, I believe the government is morally obliged to serve people, namely by protecting life, liberty, and property. I favored representative government and denounced tyranny. I believe that if the government didn't protect the people's life, liberty, and property and violates individual rights, they can legitimately revolt.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Locke.
Thank you for having me.
We have asked Mary Wollstonecraft if she could join us this morning. We're glad she could.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me. What made you want to stand up for women's rights during a time that was so dangerous to do so?
Well, I understood the different treatment between men and women. I knew something had to be done about men receiving more importance than women. I was not afraid to stand up for what I thought was the fair thing for all people, and I knew I could inspire other women to feel the same way, so I stood up for women's rights. I knew there was more to life for a woman than just being treated unfairly, and I wasn't going to stop until I attained my goal of receiving equality for all women.
Thank you for coming, Miss Mary.
Now, can I have all 3 guests please come out? We have some questions to get all of your opinions on. First, how does increased learning result in challenges to religious institutions?
My learning definitely challenged the church. I found evidence that supported the Copernican theory. It contradicted the church doctrine.
My essays on religious tolerance were what separated the church and the state. The church disagreed with my writings and wanted their thoughts to be correct.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Second, how is intellectual development a catalyst for change?
Intellectual development was a catalyst for change for me because wisdom is passed on to others. As one person becomes more intelligent and knowledgeable, the curious spirit spreads to other people and starts a change of more knowledge throughout the world.
People understand more about what is happening in the world. Women know that men are getting more rights, and they want the same thing. That is what caused women to demand change, because if women did not know that men were getting treated better, there would be no need for change in society.
I laid the foundations for modern physics and astronomy. I invented the telescope, and that allowed other Enlightenment thinkers to create more ideas about the solar system.
Third, what factors result in the demand for freedom?
I demanded for women to have rights equal to men. Men were getting treated better as more important people than women, and that is what caused me to demand freedom of women.
In my case, I demanded freedom because my ideas were not supported. The church disagreed with my ideas, and that caused me to charge with heresy. I wanted freedom because I wanted people to understand my ideas and accept a new way of thinking.
People demand freedom when their rights are not respected. People should get what they deserve.
Fourth, why do new forms of government develop?
Societies form governments by mutual agreement. Governments should be created by the people who are being governed.
There are new ideas that people spread to the government. In my case, women wanted rights that were equal to men. A new form of government would develop to give the rights to women that they have been fighting for years.
New governments develop because people don't get the freedom they deserve.
And last but not least, how can revolutions impact global affairs?
Well, as people start to revolt, it spreads and is passed on from person to person. With that kind of spreading, revolutions can impact governments all around the world.
The revolution of women speaking out for their rights can impact global affairs because I sparked women in our area to want to fight for their rights, and that sparked a fire for women to want to fight for their rights all over the world.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you guys so much for your time, and I hope everyone enjoyed these Enlightenment thinkers being here with us today.